pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Are we on? Are we on? Okay. I'll call this meeting to order of the Planning Commission. I'm going to skip over the long dialogue of back and forth between applicants and opponents. Since we only have the applicant here, if they need clarification on the rules or procedures, they can ask me at any time. There's Mark's walking in. But I'll introduce our board members. To my left is Fred Edwards. Mark Bittner's walking in. Got Paul Moore. To my right is Chris Doty and Wilson Borden. We'll go to the approval of the action minutes of May 24th.
I move we approve the action minutes of the May 24th Planning Commission meeting as presented by staff.
I'll second that.
All right. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Oppose? Okay. Robin?
Yeah, the first item is a deferred item, T17-01, located at 1 and 3 Verizon Place by Verizon Wireless. By Troutman Sanders LLP for a proposed rooftop antenna and a request for one waiver from section 54-6B to allow rooftop antennas to be located less than 3,500 feet from the existing telecommunications facility, and second waiver from section 54-6H to allow the rooftop antennas and associated structures to project 13 feet rather than the maximum 10 feet above the roof line. This item had been originally brought to you at the May 24th meeting. It was deferred to re-advertise for the required waivers and the withdrawal of a concurrent variance, which was inaccurately applied for as asked by staff. So I'll go ahead and review the case for you, and we'll go from there. Too much technology. Okay. So right here you all see the location. It's near our old City Hall building at Deerfield Parkway and Morris Road. This is a general site plan. You can see there's 2 buildings that are going to be impacted with, there's 2 antennas on the southern building and then 1 antenna, the number 3, on the northern building. The applicant is asking for this primarily to be used for their campus right there, their offices, but this is the existing coverage without the rooftop antennas, and if you just look at exactly where the arrow is, it's a lot of yellow, and then here's the area once they would install it, the type of coverage is in green, so it increases that. There's 2 waivers that they're requesting. One is proposed antennas less than 3,500 feet from existing facilities. This is a map showing where an existing facility is on Highway 9 across from Walmart, behind Staten Heating and Air. The second waiver that they're requesting is to extend more than 10 feet above the roof line. It is a 13-foot high antenna. Just staff notes that there's a parapet as well as a penthouse that is there, so it helps to, it can help alleviate the view of it. There's another view of the 3 Verizon building. Also, I didn't include it in the presentation, but there you have in your packets the balloon test with where the proposed antennas would fall and what they would look like from different viewpoints around the building. So anyway, you have that. It is requested by, again, Troutman Sanders for Verizon Wireless by Jennifer Alwine. The existing use is obviously the offices for Verizon Wireless, and the request is for the installation of the roof antennas at 1 and 3 Verizon Place. And I've already kind of reviewed the waivers through the previous slides, so I won't bore you again with it. As a background, this is the first application for new telecommunications equipment that has been reviewed since the adoption of the telecommunications ordinance in December of '09. And that lays in Chapter 54. It's not in the zoning ordinance, but in the ordinance it calls for the Planning Commission to review it. Staff notes that this request is not a traditional monopole tower, but for antennas on 1 and 3 Verizon Place. This type of equipment nonetheless still requires a full review and approval by the mayor and city council and for your recommendation. As I said, they're requesting antennas, and the purpose is to provide 4G LTE technology for wireless voice and data service, especially for the Verizon wireless offices itself. Verizon states that capacity issues on the windward and leeward, which is on the east side of 400 sites, affect network performance and customer experience. Placing antennas on the top of the buildings will help alleviate the congestion by absorbing the traffic from employees and users in the parking lots and exterior areas on and near the Verizon campus. Further, the applicant states that the existing LTE coverage with antennas, the dominant signal provided by the proposed antennas on the roof of the buildings, will allow customers to benefit from the improved coverage with faster speeds and better overall performance. Each antenna has a 12 by 12 lease area on the roof. The height of each of the proposed antennas are 13 feet. The rooftop height of both buildings is 30.8 feet, and once installed, the top of the antenna will be 43.8 feet, which is the reason for waiver number 2. As I stated earlier, this item was before you on the May 24th meeting. The city attorney had determined instead of a concurrent variance, a quote-unquote waiver would be required as required by the telecommunication ordinance. Our city attorney is here. I know there were some questions at the previous meeting. What was the difference between a waiver and concurrent variance and how that impacts this request? So Mr. Fricke's here after we do the presentation to answer any of those questions. So again, this is what's being requested, the waiver number 1, to allow the rooftop antennas to be less than 3,500 feet from the existing facility over on Highway 9. It's approximately 2974, and the applicant may have a more exact number, but that's what was estimated by staff. Number 2, again, is the rooftop antennas to project 13 feet rather than the allowable 10 feet. These waivers may be achieved through approval action by the mayor and city council under the provisions of the telecommunications ordinance. And in regards to the analysis per the Chapter 54, I'll review those. The facility permit shall be reviewed by the mayor and city council in accordance with the standards set forth in the chapter. Approval of any application for the construction of a new tower or placement of an antenna shall be based on consideration of the following factors. 1, demonstrated need for proximity to residential structures and residential district boundaries. The proposed antennas are located within a 49-acre office park, and with Lake Deerfield development is located to the northeast, which is approximately 15 feet away from the closest antenna. In addition, based on the balloon test and photo simulations, the proposed antenna will not be seen within the property when standing in the same direction of the townhomes. Number 2, the demonstrated need for the proposed height of the tower. The applicant has submitted the RF study and has demonstrated the proposed 13 feet high antenna on top of the buildings will provide the needed coverage for this location, as we saw under the coverage maps earlier. Minimal impact on the use of adjacent properties. It's staff's opinion that the type and size of an antenna will have a minimum impact on the use of adjacent properties as demonstrated by the results of the balloon test and photo simulations. Surrounding topo, tree coverage, and foliage that buffer the potential visual impact of the telecommunications facility. And just stating there's existing mature trees and foliage surrounding the subject buildings, and the size of the antenna provide more than adequate buffer from the surrounding uses. Number 5, design of the facility with particular reference to design characteristics which have the effect of reducing or eliminating visual obtrusiveness to include considerations of stealth technology installations. So the proposed antennas will be painted black or match the roof color as recommended by the Design Review Board at its May 2nd, 2017 meeting to blend in with the parapet and ballast mounted on the rooftops of both buildings. Proposed ingress and egress, there will be no ingress or egress based on the location of the antenna on top of the buildings. Availability of suitable existing towers and other structures or alternative emerging technologies not requiring the use of towers or structures. The applicant stated that this request is specifically for the Verizon-owned building and no other structures or towers were considered for the placement. 8, demonstrated needs for the telecommunications facility at the specified site. The applicant's radio frequency design engineer's presentation, which is part of the application, demonstrates the need for this request. Also, there are no other facilities within a half mile of the subject site as shown on the following map. As they indicated, other existing structures or facilities. With reference to the City of Milton existing towers map as amended, the exhibit below lists existing towers within the City of Milton. I'm sure you all can read that mice type, but anyway. Okay, so staff's recommendation is based on the above factors that we recommend approval conditional of T17-01 and waivers 1 and 2 as requested by the applicant. If the mayor and city council choose to approve the requests, recommended conditions are listed below. If this petition is approved by the mayor and city council, the following should be recommended or approved. 1A, to the telecommunication facility application, including site plans, building elevations, and details of roof antennas received by the Community Development Department on February 27th, 2017, including subsequent revisions and or additions to the application. B, waiver number 1, to allow the roof antennas to be located less than 3,500 feet from an existing telecommunications facility. Waiver 2, to allow the rooftop antennas and associated structures to project more than 10 feet above the roof line. D, all antennas shall be painted black or a color which matches the roof color. And with that, I'm open to any questions, as well as the city attorney is here to answer the questions. I did give him a list of the questions that you had from the last meeting, so hopefully he'll be able to answer those questions as well. So.
All right. Any questions for staff before the applicant comes up? All right. Let's hear from the applicant.
Okay.
We'll go over that. Thanks.
Members of the Commission, good evening. My name is Jen Aylwine. I'm an attorney with Troutman Sanders, and I'm here representing Verizon. Robin did such a thorough job in her analysis. I'm certainly not going to repeat all of that. Simply just want to point out there's a huge need in this area. The tower that we're requesting the waiver from, the nearby tower, Verizon's already located on that tower, and that's the tower that's overburdened, and it cannot handle the volume of activity in the area, and so we need these additional antennas to relieve it and bring some coverage to this area. I'd like to point out this is a huge 43-acre parcel owned by Verizon. The building is owned by Verizon as well, and these will be Verizon antennas that will not be seen. The entire 43 acres is heavily landscaped, so the antennas certainly wouldn't be seen from the surrounding roads. It will all be insular to Verizon's campus. Otherwise, I'm just here to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you. Can you state your address for the record?
Sure. It's 600 Peachtree Street, Suite 5200, Atlanta, Georgia, 30308.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Do we have any opposition at all? No? Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Well, I'll close public comment and open up for questions.
Yeah, we got a couple.
All right.
Goes back to some of the things we talked about last time, whether it's staff or city attorney that responds, please. In granting this request and the suggested waivers, is this precedent setting for any other either telecommunication companies or anything else within the industry that we might be subject to by granting what's requested?
Generally, my official comment is generally stated each variance or waiver or exception should be considered on its own merits and typically is subject to a set of facts and circumstances and underlying bases that would tend to not make it precedent for the next case unless it is substantially similar to another one, in which case I would go into a litigation arguing that it was different unless there were incredibly similar facts, same height, same location, same exact distance from every related type of possible use. Generally stated, it is not a precedent to other situations. I can't say never, ever, but generally stated.
And another question I had last time was, can we hold them accountable to remove these antennas if they become obsolete? If the technology continues to change, we know that this is, as I think shared with us last time, this particular 13-foot antenna is not necessarily new, but it does resolve this particular problem. And my question to you last time was, we know that the technology is going to continue to change. And if this particular antenna becomes obsolete, can we put it as a condition that it's removed as the technology continues to advance where that antenna would no longer be required?
Removal provision.
Yeah, I think in the ordinance, we talk about I think it's more specifically if you're installing a new facility, then the other one has to be taken down. So I'm assuming that would be the same.
I mean, we're not opposed to it as a condition, but I think it's covered in the ordinance.
Yeah.
Okay. I guess that's it for the moment with that. Is the granting of this, if we were to move forward with it as it's written, does it limit them to this particular number of antennas? They can't necessarily add more without coming back for additional requests before mayor and council?
I mean, I would, from a general zoning or practical viewpoint, it's conditioned to the set of plans that are here. So if they were to do another one, it would be my opinion, and the city attorney can comment on it, that there would have to be new application for additional, because right now it's only for those 3 antennas.
Yeah, and if I remember correctly, it's mostly because of the capacity demands by the Verizon employees on site. And
It'll certainly help those. We have them on the edges of the building towards the roads to help out the roads, during especially high commuting time as well. But we understand this to be site plan specific, and so just those antennas would be the only ones we understood that we could put up at this time.
Okay. I think that was the extent of my questions from last time. I guess go back to the original question that we had about the difference between a waiver and a variance.
As a legal matter, they've got a different name. As a practical matter, probably no real impact other than they're in different ordinances, and when they were written, they were tried. But the impact is to allow something to be done that is not otherwise allowed under that ordinance. So same impact, just got called a different name in this ordinance versus the other ordinance.
Okay. Yep, that's the extent of my questions.
Any other questions? All right. I'll open it up for a motion.
I move we approve T17-01 as requested with staff's recommendations for conditions.
Second.
Okay, we got a motion, a second. Any discussion on the motion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Oppose? Okay.
Thank you very
Thank you.
much.
Okay, the next item is a new item. It's the text amendment to Chapter 20, Environment, Article 7, Noise Control.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the Planning Commission. This is a new revised noise ordinance that we're bringing forward for your review as a courtesy review. It does not fall within the zoning ordinances. However, we wanted to bring it here for a review and public hearing. The intent here is to make an ordinance that is more readable by both the enforcement sector as well as the residents and businesses of the city. The intent also is to include some items that were not previously addressed in our old noise ordinance. So we're hoping to create a bigger and better mousetrap, so to speak, with this ordinance. I'd like to introduce Taylor Stickles, who is an intern in our office, and he worked very hard with Robin on this draft in front of you. So when we invited him to come to follow the process through, so that's Taylor. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Robin. Robin has put together a chart showing the differences between our existing ordinances and the new ordinance, and then certainly we would be available to answer any questions on a page-by-page basis, or however you would like to review the ordinance. Okay, so Robin.
So I did send you the link for the existing, as it stands, noise ordinance. If you'd like to have a hard copy, I have it here. So anybody want one in front of them? Or you good? Okay, great. So I'm going to go ahead and put this on, use our new fangled technology. Oh, here it is. No, I have to get it. It's going to come up on your screen.
Here it goes.
Robin is the outside mowing currently within our sound ordinance.
It's when the timing, but.
Make characterize as lawn maintenance
You have to be there by
machinery.
7:30, right?
Well, Bob was always making sure it wasn't during working hours, so now we just have to find other times it's not during meetings.
Totally knows. Here we are, Wednesday night, and it's
Yeah.
Sound ordinance, you've got more. Very good timing.
Would be ironic.
Yeah, we can't win for losing. So anyway, this is, as Kathy mentioned, it's a new ordinance. The proposed new ordinance is to basically eliminate the existing ordinance, noise ordinance as it stands, and replace it with this one. It's a basis from Charlotte, Mecklenburg County, so it's not like I came up with it or any one person came up with it, but I tried to modify it to be used for our jurisdiction. We also did get input. We asked the police department, code enforcement, and other people within our department for any comments or input. So it was not done in a vacuum. So I'll go over the different comparison of the different issues. So general noise, the existing ordinance not permitted based on a complicated source and receiving of sound. So it just, as you know, it's very confusing and daunting to try to use. The proposed ordinance is pretty simple. It prohibited when creating unreasonably loud and disturbing noise with no minimum sound dBA. So basically it's like if something is unreasonably loud and disturbing, then it would be against the ordinance. Sounds impacting residential life. So this is specific for residential properties or impacting residential properties. So in the existing ordinance, there's a minimum dBA for residential and then modifications with complicated change in noise level and duration. So it's just, again, very arduous to be able to use. In the new ordinance, it's section 20-659, any noise that negatively impacts residential life categorized by various uses within specific times not permitted. And general exemptions, so the typical government mandated work, noise from aircraft, watercraft, railroads, that's under the existing ordinance. It's very similar. In the new ordinance, it's Exemptions would be emergency operations work by the city in the right-of-way if required between 9 p.m. and 7 a.m. Sounds exempt during daytime hours. So in general, the old ordinance was between 7:30 a.m. and 10 p.m. You could not do noise exceeding certain dBAs, including construction sites and commercial lawn maintenance. In the proposed ordinance, exemptions for both sound and amplified sound prohibited during certain days and times based on type of user. And again, it's not all complicated by all the different levels of dBA. So it's something that the old ordinance did not take into account was amplified sound. It just really spoke to sound in general. So this ordinance makes that distinction. And so in section 20-660, it breaks down the various types of amplified sound in all zoning districts and types of users and prohibited days and times. And then it goes further to talk about additional amplification for residential or commercial use. And that's obviously in our existing one that doesn't exist, but it does in the new one under section 20-661. Basically, if you need additional amplification, you'd have to go and ask for a permit to do that. Same thing with outdoor amplification and music at commercial establishments and residentially used properties. So again, you would need to have ask for a permit for that greater amount of or additional amplification. So there's something in the ordinance, in the new ordinance, talk about chronic commercial noise. So I think an example would be, I think a few years ago there was a particular restaurant on Highway 9 that had fairly frequent reports and complaints, and I think that was definitely an issue that took a while to resolve. So that's exactly what this part of the ordinance addresses, is trying to deal with that chronic commercial noise. Something interesting is animals. I know I get a lot of calls, not a lot, but fairly frequently, where one neighbor will be calling me about, hey, their dog is barking at 2 and 3 in the morning constantly, whereas at the old ordinance, we would have to get, a meter out there and figure out, okay, is this above a certain dBA, whereas now the ordinance would be, basically it's against the ordinance to be a bother. So a little bit easier to use. Motor vehicles, again, this was more specific. It talks about motor vehicles and sound coming from motor vehicles, whereas before there was nothing specific toward that type of noise. Penalties are the same. We just use section 1-5, which is where the city code addresses penalties of different types of going against the ordinance. So, variance and appeals administratively granted by the community development director. There's in the old ordinance, Kathy, at times there would be certain developments who needed to work on a Sunday, so because of weather problems previously, so she would write a letter giving them permission to be able to do work on that time and day. So, and at this point in the proposed ordinance, we can do something similar. There's nothing in it right now other than what would be an appeals process in the general chapter 20. So those are just an overview of what the ordinance does. And again, it's a little bit longer, but I think it's more comprehensive. It's easier to be able to use out in the field. And so with that, I'll leave you guys with any questions, or if you want to start going page by page, or however way you guys want to do it.
Does anyone have any generic questions real quick before we do go page by page, if that's what y'all want to do?
I've got one that it doesn't sound like would be on the page. So, Robin, does that mean there's no variance whatsoever, or that means that? Explain that last part to me one more time.
Right. It's we can make it the same. So right now it's not written directly into that portion of it, but this lays in chapter 20, which typically goes to the Board of Zoning Appeals, which I think it worked pretty well the old way where Kathy had the ability to give, a variance or permission to go outside of, especially,
Yeah.
typically it was only construction.
Yeah, and the perfect example is if they were doing a big concrete pour. And to do a big concrete pour for a building, they have to start at 4 in the morning. So, and our ordinance would not allow them to do that, but I could give them a waiver to do that. And so those are the type of circumstances that a waiver would be requested.
So without that, they would have to go before the Variance Board of Appeals, which might take,
60 days or something.
yes.
Yeah, so I think that's probably something we should look at putting back in, because I think
Yes.
I do have the ability to discern whether it's a viable request or not, and I do think it's helpful to our construction community, and I always put the caveat in there that if it lasts more than one day, that they have to be careful that I don't have any complaints, because if I do, I'm going to rethink my permission. So I always put that type of caveat in there, so.
Kathy, when you've granted those exceptions in the past, did it come with a specific time period, had to be done?
Yes.
Within that week, or?
Yeah, they would usually say that it might be 2 or 3 days or something, or sometimes it may be just, if it were a construction, for instance, the school addition, one of the school additions, that they wanted to start early every day because they had a tight time frame. It was the summer vacation that they had to complete this. So I would give them permission to start sooner, with the caveat that I didn't get any neighborhood complaints, and that if I did, I was going to withdraw that. So it would be that type of situation.
I have a couple suggested changes, but that's later on. So y'all just want to go page by page real quick? Y'all good with that?
Yep.
All right, y'all got anything on page 1? Let me know. Anything?
Definitions.
All right, page 2.
Yep.
All right, I got some stuff. You can go, Fred.
Well, that's right, mine's clear at the bottom, so.
Okay, get anything on
I
top?
got some stuff
Okay.
above. When we talk about waste haulers, it says non-exclusive contracts. Granted, for non-exclusive contracts, is there a reason that we're saying that in particular, where it's specific like that?
Yeah, so this comes from the city code that deals with waste hauling. And so that's the way a waste hauler is defined, because in the city of Milton, there's no one contractor. So that's why it's non-exclusive, so that a person could change from one waste hauler to another. So versus like the city of Alpharetta has one waste hauler for the entire city, whereas Milton, every resident can choose from a list of approved haulers
So
that
by
are
saying non-exclusive contracts, it's
Right.
actually a broader spectrum that we're including in that. It's not a narrow spectrum.
It's not a wet spectrum.
By saying non-exclusive contract haulers, basically, it's covering everybody.
Yeah, it is, yeah.
I thought it was actually more restrictive. It's actually,
Yeah. I mean, it could even be somebody who contracted to bring a whole, whatever, those large loaders. And I mean, in a way, they're
Yeah.
trash haulers
Sure.
too, so,
I mean, in effect, that word could come out.
yeah,
I
okay.
mean, it's just more descriptive and it's used the same way as the rest of the ordinance. I mean,
Yeah, no, I'm
it
okay
doesn't
with it.
restrict it anymore,
I'm
because
okay
there are
with it
no.
As long as it's not, my objective was to make sure that it
Yeah.
was a broader, more inclusive than too narrow.
Right, because we don't, as long as there are no exclusive
Right.
contracts.
Right, there's not.
Those would be the only ones that wouldn't be covered under this, and since we don't have any, based on our system that's set up.
Okay. Fred, yours is further down still.
Yeah, but one, relating to that, down at the bottom on your chart, Sundays and federal holidays, 6 p.m. to 9 a.m. It applies to construction, applies to maintenance, but it doesn't apply to waste haulers.
So
Are you
because,
saying that waste haulers can come in on Sunday?
correct, the way that the waste haulers ordinance is, there's no exclusion of running on that on Sundays. It doesn't speak to that. They can come all 7 days a week. So I can't restrict them on this if they're already allowed to haul any day of the week. I don't think they typically do, but I mean,
Well, yeah, this is a perfect example, is July 4th
right, yeah.
falling on the date, and so they've moved. I just got the phone call, I have Waste Management, got the phone call that they would be moving everybody over one day, which
Right.
would include Saturday and Sunday.
Right. So this is just reflective of what the waste hauler, of the other ordinance that deals with the waste hauler. So I can't really change that because that's
Okay.
what they're permitted to do.
But in Fred's example where it says approved waste haulers, does that mean that is that different than the non-exclusive contract haulers?
I guess there could be a difference in the sense if somebody did a one-up, somebody hired somebody to bring out a certain amount of debris. So we could remove approved waste haulers so that it would be more inclusive. Because we do have like a list of whatever, it's 10, 13 approved waste haulers. So I guess one could hire somebody to bring in a big, whatever, 50-yard or whatever they are, and then go pick it up. And we don't want them doing it at 10 o'clock at night or 6 in the morning. So
Right.
I think that's a good point to get rid of the approved waste haulers.
But isn't this saying just the reverse of what we were saying a minute ago, which actually provides greater protection by saying operation of approved waste haulers are not bound by those restrictions? If you don't say approved there, then that implies that all of them can operate on those Sundays. So I was only questioning it, same question Fred had, was because I think it's actually okay like it is, because it's a narrower description in my interpretation of it, unless I'm reading it wrong.
Because
Yeah, it's like a double negative.
Yeah. So in the top part where I was asking the first time, non-exclusive contracts implies that it's everybody. Okay? Where on this one, where you're saying
approved.
this is only approved, it can't just be anybody that's given the wide open, because it only applies to them.
Actually, I think because this chart shows only when something is prohibited, if we're referring to non-approved waste haulers, based on what we're saying, they would not be prohibited anytime. They would be allowed anytime, based on distinguishing approved versus non-approved, because this chart covers when things are prohibited. Everything else is allowed. So if we don't put a restriction on them in this chart,
They are allowed.
they would be allowed. So
Okay. So we are better than to
you're
strike.
right that they wouldn't be covered, but that doesn't mean that they're restricted. That means
I didn't
they're
know
not
if they would
restricted.
fall under a different category.
They may.
Oh, okay.
I
I don't know if they
haven't
would
looked
fall
at
under
that.
one of these categories. I don't know. Okay.
So Paul, you're suggesting if we strike the approved and go to the all-inclusive, we're better served?
That would mean
Yeah,
that all
that
waste
makes sense.
haulers are restricted as indicated in the chart.
That makes sense. Just strike approved and it takes care of the problem.
Right, and I think that's
That's
what.
fine. Yeah,
Robin
that's what
had
I
said.
suggested, that we can do that.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Not to get into the
No,
nitty-gritty,
but,
but into the nitty-gritty, that those approved haulers are non-exclusive contracts, so it's all kind of a
Yep.
complicated web.
While we're looking at the chart real quick, my only question when I first asked Robin is how is this different as far as restriction on the residential use compared to the previous one? And correct me if I'm wrong, the way noise ordinance is now, I can mow my lawn up until 10 o'clock at night. But now I can't mow my lawn past 7:30, right?
Or
So-
6 o'clock on Sundays, I think.
So, me, just as my personal opinion is, I think 7:30, like I said, it's 6:45 right now. I bet you some people are just getting home from work and probably would like to mow their lawn a little past 7:30. So if right now we're telling people you can do yard work till 10, which I think is probably, no one's doing yard work at 10 o'clock. I think 7:30 would mean it's still going to be light outside in the summer. That might be too early and too restrictive on the property owner for residential, not so much for commercial use. Right. So, I mean, I kind of would be, I would kind of like to maybe make it 8:30. I mean, I don't know what that perfect time is. I was just curious what everyone else thought. Because right now we're cutting them off by 2.5 hours. What are y'all's opinion on
No,
the time?
I'm in agreement.
Okay.
I think that that's too restrictive of a private individual on their own
And that lets
property.
the commercial guy cut lawns on holidays, but not the homeowner. I mean, is that right? I mean, is that what it?
So right
got
now,
that backwards?
the commercial and residential have the same timing as far as Monday through Friday. So if you wanted to amend the residential, then we'll just add another row and have a new set of times
Yeah, I
just
think
for the residential.
I would like to have the residential extended, but keep maybe the commercial the same. But I mean,
Yes.
I'm trying to think, what's the commercial now? I'm just curious.
Commercial now.
7:30, Monday through Friday.
It's 7:30 to 7:30.
Now?
Yep.
Okay, and residential's 10. So why don't we, can we add another line? The volume in this room is like unbelievable.
He's got 45 minutes.
And he's at
No, they're exempt. They are exempt. They can go till 3 a.m. if they want.
Got to be a governmental
That's
exemption
government
there.
there, man.
Early, but in the future, it's got to be an emergency.
Yeah, so we can add another row to be whatever.
Okay,
I'm
so
sorry.
what time are y'all comfortable with on?
8:30 maybe?
We
do you
make
think, Paul?
9
I think
since it's
9
pretty,
o'clock.
9 it's still light out.
still light out.
Around 9.
7:30 a.m. to
9 p.m.
9 p.m.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Which, right now it's 10 o'clock, which probably is, if you're in a residential neighborhood, that probably is a little too
You'd
late.
be
So
mowing it at
9, I
nighttime.
think 9's a good
Yeah.
compromise. Y'all good with that? Okay.
Okay, so we'll do 7. So that would, you want that including not just lawn maintenance, but your own construction machinery, the second column as well? Do you want?
What was the old 10? So
So it was just, let's see, yeah, it was 10.
I don't just do lawn maintenance.
You're talking about construction machinery on
Bobcats
residential
running.
property?
I still
something
think
till
you're going to
9
have.
o'clock,
I
that's a
still think there are people that want to work in their garage for a little bit of time, and I
It's
mean,
okay as long as you can't hear it.
Well, the guy that works on his motorcycle next door to me works on his motorcycle.
I just don't want to be so
Till 10.
heavy-handed.
No, it's totally up to you all. I don't.
How do you feel about that? Is 10 o'clock okay?
No, I said.
Extend it to 11?
Only if you live off a hope wall, you can do it. What I mean, how about 9? It was 9 okay?
Yeah, I think 9
Is that okay?
It was the same thing for residential lawn maintenance as well as for
Residential.
machinery.
Residential.
Otherwise, you're going to have lights on there riding lawnmowers.
Yeah, no, I do, I might.
Construction
That's what
machinery. Yeah. Okay, great.
So just while we're on that chart, just to be clear, so operation of lawn maintenance machinery by commercial users, when you have to go to the top of the next page to see that it applies. They cannot operate on Sundays and federal holidays, correct?
That's correct, yes.
Okay.
Yeah,
And they are basically Monday through Friday, 7:30 to 7:30, Saturdays, 9 a.m. to 6 p.m.
correct.
Correct? Okay.
Robin, one quick question, and it's just for my information's sake alone, is this all complaint induced, or this is code enforced straight up and down whether somebody complains or not?
I mean, I think it's a lot of the reason, like Kathy mentioned before, it's the ease of being able to apply the new noise ordinance. But we do get a fair amount of, not a fair amount, but I do get some complaints about commercial type maintenance and noise. A lot of times we have people who are out there doing construction, and we just have to be able to say
But I
to
think to
stop
answer
it.
Wilson's inquiry, it's usually complaint driven.
Right.
Is usually what
Okay.
happens.
So, I mean, just argument's sake, in the back of Deerfield, they build a 1 acre lot of some kind of commercial thing, and they're working Sunday, but it's not really bothering anybody. Code enforcement wouldn't necessarily go shut them down unless nobody's
They don't
complaining.
work on Sunday, that's correct, unless, you're right, unless we got a complaint about it, or somebody, if a staff member happened to be driving through, you know, on their way to the grocery store, and that's
Sure.
happened quite a bit. They think
Okay.
nobody's watching, and lo and behold, here's a staff member who goes by and reports them, so,
Okay.
yeah.
So does that include, if I read it as operation of maintenance, of lawn maintenance machinery by commercial users, that includes like the staging thereof. So if you can't run the lawnmower out of the back of the truck, creating, because it has to be turned on, it's creating all the dB that would come with the positioning of that, so they're ready to go at 7:30. They're rolling, but they're actually operational at 6:30 to get all their gear in place. And I cite that because I've got my own personal issue to deal with our club. They're staging stuff at 6:30 in the morning on Saturday.
Did you hear that this morning?
Pardon?
Did you hear that this morning?
No, I didn't hear it this morning, but
I'll talk to you about it afterwards.
Out
But
there,
At 5:30 this morning, somebody was running something behind our house. It was
Okay.
over by the club. But I'll-
yeah, so
That's me, my leaf blower.
so they've been, it's like they run the big machinery out, so it's on the hole that they're gonna do starting at whatever, but they're rolling it up and down the fairways at
I
6:30
mean, I
in the
think
morning.
whatever definition of operation, whether it's actually going or whether preparation, it would be operating it.
My general,
Yeah.
my general inclination on interpretation of the word operations, if it's running,
Yeah,
it's operating, and staging is
necessarily-
part of the operation.
yeah, okay. Don't talk to you about that. Yeah, it's my pet peeve. It's like, hey, guys, you gotta knock it off. Okay.
Good point.
That's all I have on the chart right there. But I've got some other ones that are actually further up.
Okay.
So on the comparison chart that you gave us, Robin, under sounds impacting residential life, I know that we have had a history of a couple of our Milton citizens complaining about the school activities, and they've been longtime residents. They were complaining about sports activities and the bands and the weekend competitions and the whatever. I don't see anywhere where that's actually addressed, where I'm okay with school activities. I don't know that the citizenry should be complaining if they've chosen to live near one of the schools. The kids should be allowed to compete on a Friday night. And if the game goes past 11 o'clock, it goes past 11 o'clock. There's amplified sound that goes along with that. If there's a marching band competition on the weekend and it goes into the night, they should be allowed to do that. And yet we know we've got a history of complaints about those things. I don't see that I think if I just read your sounds impacting residential life and it says any noise that negatively impacts residential life categorized by various uses with specific times not permitted, I think we're opening up potentially a can of worms with that. Are we, is my question.
I mean, I think that's a good point. I'm not sure if there's any exemptions because it's from
I figured they
a
were
Board of
exempt.
Education location, or if that has anything to do with it. So I think that's a good point that we need to address, or at least answer.
I mean, school-specific things may have some exemption. It's typically a zoning
Right.
automatic exemption, but I think our definition of government entity would qualify as probably capture a Board of Education.
Yeah.
Although if we want to, it could be made clear, and I would recommend if it is intended to capture or not capture, it should, the more clear you are in stating it, the better.
Yeah, so we might want to contemplate some
Right.
language that does
No, I agree.
exempt schools or city activities, if you guys decide to host an event.
That's
I think that there's.
How about Hopewell?
I think that's
Hopewell too. I mean,
Considered a
that's
government event or
Yeah.
something, a government.
like the parks. I mean,
We
they're out
can
there
work on
playing.
that.
I mean, that's not a school, Hopewell
I
Park.
think I saw the city-sponsored stuff, but I didn't.
Yeah.
I just when this, I thought it was a Board of
I
Education.
think there are
they were
some
exempt or something.
city-sponsored issues
Yeah.
addressed, but we can work on that to
Okay.
include school board, school activities.
Okay,
I mean, it would you'd probably almost have to do both public and private, because, I don't, you know,
Yeah,
yeah.
because you've got
Kings Ridge or,
Kings Ridge, you've got,
St. Francis.
yeah, all.
yeah.
The other one I've got, Robin, that I think would fall in this, somewhere in those, in the first page of things we've got listed here, is we know that there have been complaints by our equestrian community about the use of fireworks within the city because they are at such risk for horses. We don't address that specifically in here. Did we not address it by design?
I'll
or is that?
comment. We have discussed that, and it has been brought to our attention, but we have been advised that state law allows fireworks. Therefore, you cannot have a local ordinance controlling that.
Can we, just broad brushstroke, they're allowed, so we can't address it at all? Can we say within certain
The state
distance
dictates
of
times,
a
too.
horse farm or you know, we know we've got them sprinkled, well, we of course don't want to, well, let me say it differently. We know that there are a lot of equestrian estates, large, medium, and small, in our community. That's a contingency we don't want to leave out when they have had complaints, and we have had I think we've had horse deaths related to fireworks in the community.
Yeah.
Do we want to ignore? Can we ignore that? I don't want to ignore that.
Well, I'm going to defer to our city attorney. I've just told you what I was advised, so, yeah.
And I don't know the details of the state law versus this law, but the general concept is that if the state regulates so as to pervade the field, we can't go in and make separate special rules. I know that there are definitely state regulations in the field. I don't know if they have hour requirements, if they have location requirements, but
Or distance requirement.
and distance. And to the extent they do that, that's going to make it real hard for us to provide something different. Or even if it doesn't necessarily conflict, it could still be argued that they have, pervasive regulation of the field such that we can't come up with a new system. I haven't looked at that, walking into this, but there's a good potential that if they have taken the steps to create that, and I know that it was certainly a concept that was thought that they are going to open it up, and it was.
Well, I know it's there was, I'm sure, a lot of demand for it by the commercial component of that, but
Sure.
To ignore our constituency that, where it's life-threatening to a significant investment, which is these horses, and we know that we're trying to promote the fact that we are an equestrian community.
Right.
It seems in conflict that we can't find a way to coexist with the state's legislation.
Lobby your legislators.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Well, I would just encourage us to take another swipe at it maybe and see
Yeah.
if there is a way we can coexist without
Okay,
just ignoring.
I also can say that the state law does define certain areas where you can disallow fireworks, such as parks, near nursing homes. So it's stated very specifically in the law. So I don't know
If
if we
they've
have to go
taken-
back and amend those restrictions, I guess.
If
is
they've
way
taken
we'll
the
have to go.
steps to identify areas they consider protected but didn't include that, chances are good that a dispute would be resolved in favor of limiting it to what the state has applied. Not in all cases,
Okay. Well, I would just respectfully request that we take another
Sure, we
swipe
can-
at
we'll-
that.
we got to do that.
Equestrian community is too important to us to have a chance to look at the ordinance and not address that for them if possible. I think that's all I had on that page.
Anything else on page 2?
Just before you go, I note that in 20-658, it says the awaiting sale should be scale.
Oh, yeah.
Where was it?
2658.
You're taking over Fred's job.
All right, we'll go to page 3 if no one else has anything. amplified sound stuff, emergencies.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I got a couple. On the chart, where it's talking about in the public right-of-way, including streets or sidewalks, or in the city parks, without having actual on-site possession of a permit issued by the City of Milton Police Registry, more than 75 dBA, 10 feet or more from any electromagnetical speaker. Does that include, like, moving cars?
So there's another section that speaks to cars and moving cars toward the end that may
Yeah, I think I made
cover
notes
it.
there
Motor
as well.
vehicles on page 7. So if you're trying to deal with very loud cars and exhaust and all that, that's,
Yeah, so and I'll talk about the definition of that when we get there, but, so this chart does not necessarily address that.
correct, that's not.
And is that by design, or is this a place for us to potentially address it?
Well, I believe that we're attempting to address it in 20-663, but,
Okay, well, let's see where it goes when we get there. Just a structural thing with this chart. On the first chart that we had, our times were stated as 7:30 p.m. to 7:30 a.m., and the way we're representing the times here is the reverse of that. We're saying between 8 a.m. and 9 p.m. Do we want to change that to be consistent with the first chart, or?
I think the first chart's confusing. Monday through Friday, and you start out at 7:30 p.m. to 7:30 a.m.
well, that's when you're not
Well,
supposed
actually,
to do it.
To his comment, I mean, on page 3, it says it shall be unlawful to operate, and then between 8 a.m.
Yeah.
and 9 p.m., so.
And it's
Should
no
that-
big deal. I mean, Fred, I think the first chart actually has to read that way.
Yeah,
Because
I
those are,
agree.
so you can't really flip that one.
No.
And this one, I think you can flip if we care. We don't have to. I would just noted that it's different than the first chart. So one way we're reading it the first way, and then the second way we're reading it a second way. And I'm okay with it either way. I just want to point it out.
Actually, I think it's actually, I mean, it's accurate just because it's between specific
Right.
times.
Yep.
I mean, between 8 and 9 is between 8 and 9. Those, it doesn't go around the clock from
Right.
9 p.m. to 8 a.m.
Right.
So this actually does read right because we've got two different.
Yeah, I agree, it reads
sound-
right. It's just inconsistent with the other one. But
I
it's-
think this is the way it was written
the-
originally, I mean,
yeah, I'm not going to, I don't need to lose sleep over it, so I'm okay.
I think it actually reads clearer this way, and, I mean, just how
It
we
does.
think, you know,
When
something is open or, you know, between 8 a.m. and 9 p.m. or whatever, so.
I just brought it up for the point of comparison, and I'm okay with it. That's all I had for that page.
Anything else on page 3? All right, we'll go to page 4.
I got nothing on 4.
Nope.
No, I don't have anything. All right, 5.
I've got one under 20.661.1C, when it talks about the duration between complaints. It says an establishment that has been determined to be non-cooperative pursuant to subsection XYZ shall be subject to enhanced civil penalties pursuant to section XYZ, and after 2 violations of the section within 1 year after having been determined to be non-cooperative, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It
Doesn't seem very often, I mean, very frequent,
right.
yeah.
So my question was, have we really gotten what we're after here when we're talking about a pretty strict,
chronic, yeah.
a stronger language. Is that really what we're after, is 2 times within a year? What if it's 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 or 7 or 8 or 9 or 10? You know, I'm
We're
just,
open to suggestions, so I think
Well, I'm
that's a
just-
good point. I
I
mean,
don't-
2 times really isn't probably that many times for establishment, so.
right?
No.
I don't have a number in mind. I just don't know that what we've suggested here, without the benefit of some more conversation about it, is that what we're after. I would just
Oh, yeah.
leave it to discussion to see what the right number is.
Is this regarding, these subsections, they regarding to the amplified sound for commercials? Is that what it is? Yeah.
Outdoor amplification of music in commercial establishments. I mean,
Well,
if
it says
it's-
after 2 violations of the section within 1 year after having been determined to be non-cooperative.
Yeah.
So it almost sounds like you get a few strikes, and these are like 2 extra strikes. Is that what it sounds like?
No, and to me, it sounds like it's a little more subjective than that. You get 2 strikes, but if you're determined to be non-compliant, like you're saying, I don't really care about that, then we have the ability to go forward with that.
So what you're saying is within 1 year after having been determined to be non-cooperative.
Right, so it refers to that 20-661-3, which is the chronic commercial noise.
Okay.
And then if they're basically made as non-cooperative or chronic noise producer, if the chief of police or designee says it is, then
to get to this
then
point.
after 2 violations is within 1 year
Is a
after
lot.
indigent shall not
I think.
operate or allow the operation. They'd have, so I think there'd be a lot of issues coming up way before the 2 times.
That's what I'm saying. So,
Yeah.
so
A lot of opportunity.
the way I read it is you have to be a chronic commercial noise person, right? Then it goes to this,
Yeah.
and then you get 2 more chances, and then you're 18 months. Which,
If that's,
is that correct? So you have to you first have to go through all this
you have to
on
be determined to be.
661.3,
Yeah.
which is a lot. I think that's
Yeah, and then you have to basically thumb your nose at the.
twice.
Keep on doing it.
I think that's okay, actually. Yeah, no, I was, at first when you read it, I was like, oh yeah, that's not right.
Yeah.
But then when I went through and read, this is
All
what
of
it,
this
this is what it refers to, I was like, oh,
Yeah.
if you get to this point, you're already,
You're already kind
yeah.
of in trouble.
Because this is
Okay.
I hear
Yeah. All right, that's what I wanted to make sure we talked about, is that,
you. Okay, yeah.
is that reasonable? And I think-
Robin,
Yes.
up in, same section, A, number 2, Sunday through Thursday, 9 PM and 2 AM the following day.
So I think it's referring to 2 AM being the following day, because that would be the morning of the
That's
next
true.
day, yeah.
I don't know, back when we were going through all this with the location we talked about earlier, but wasn't 2 AM, was that established? I thought it was earlier than that.
As far as how late they're open for business? I mean,
Well, this is referring
this
to the
is
creation
referring-
of the sound.
The sound.
right, so it would have to be open, they had to be open for business to create sounds.
This is residential stuff he's talking about, right?
No, it says commercial, so
Oh,
it's top.
okay, I'm at the bottom, sorry.
Up until 9 o'clock, you can be 85 decibel. Between 9 and 2, it has to be 60.
Right.
So I guess, yeah,
Does that change from the previous ordinance, or is that the same?
We never had anything like this.
Oh.
It's not set up like this for amplification of outdoor. It was just general DBA, so this is more specific.
You think this is more, if you're, I just want to be careful about being extremely restrictive on the businesses now than what they were previously used to, I don't know.
That's pretty generous to be able to be making noise
That's
at
what I was
2
wondering.
a.m.
And I have no idea what
That's my-
60,
that was
yeah.
my argument.
At 2 a.m. is pretty.
that when we went through all this, at least two of us.
Is this amplified sound or is this?
Yeah, outdoor
Oh.
amplification and music at commercial establishments.
So that means they can have that music at 60 till 2 o'clock in the morning.
Yep.
Yeah, but 60,
At the property line.
yeah,
right.
60 dBA at the property line
resident
is not,
that complains.
that's not very loud.
So 70, it's commercial for 70.
Like 50s, we didn't have 50s like a dishwasher. 50s like a dishwasher or something, I think.
I couldn't, my only question was,
So actually, it's a
Did we
little
have-
bit,
did we have, or,
oh, go ahead. I'm looking at the existing
Oh, okay.
one. Let's see.
What is 60 decibels?
so I remember those meetings well.
I'd pull up an app and play it.
I mean, it says, so for residential, so let's see, look at this chart here. District of sound source, district of received sound. So commercial to residential, it could be 65 dBA, and then modifications. Maximum permissible sound levels established by this article shall be reduced or increased by the sum of the following. Between the hours of 10 p.m. and 7:30 a.m., the noise level shall be reduced by 5 dBA for receiving property within residential districts. So that means it could go down to 60
Wait,
dBA.
now?
Now, yeah.
Yeah, so the,
Okay.
So it's about, I mean, it's basically the same. I
And
mean,
we haven't
And it
had-
actually, it stops at 2, whereas here, I don't really see it.
It's all night.
It's all night, so it actually is a little more restrictive as far as timing versus.
2 a.m.
2 amps, pretty generous.
Yeah.
So you're okay?
Yep.
Yeah, 60, I'm looking at it online, 60, a decibel level of 60 is conversation in a restaurant, office, background music, air conditioning unit at 100 feet. So that's, yeah, I mean,
That's pretty low.
it's not like a jackhammer or something.
Yeah.
So 60, I think, yeah. That's
I
still
just-
pretty
I just
quiet,
wanted
so.
To see the reference. back
Right, yeah,
to
so it's,
what
it's a
we
different
got.
way of getting there, but it's the same, but this limits the timing, the
Got it.
time, so.
Fine. Only thing I had on that.
Okay.
All right. Anything else on page 5, y'all? Go to page 6.
I just had the same question as I did on 5. This is now residential, and I'm now okay
Okay.
with the way that reads.
Last page, 7. You had something, I think.
Yeah, I do. Under 20-662, I'm sorry, 2663, where it's motor vehicles. I want to make sure that it's all inclusive. We're talking, so it says, which has had its muffler, exhaust, and/or other noise control equipment removed, altered, or maintained in such disrepair as to create unreasonably loud and disturbing noises. So I got a couple variations of that. So if we're saying that the vehicle has been altered or modified, is that saying the same? Is that saying it's not in disrepair, it's actually been modified to produce additional sound?
They maintained in such disrepair is kind of one phrase. So altered, modified, maintained in such disrepair.
So that's another category.
Right.
So somebody whose muffler has fallen off and they've
They just
chosen
haven't
not
fixed
to
it.
get it repaired, that's the other. So, but it also then includes those modifications such that, you know, it's a cool thing to do it to some cars to amplify their muffler or their exhaust sound to make it sound like a race car. That's covered in this.
All would be covered.
Okay.
But if the state allows it and you can drive it, how can we not? If you can drive it legally on the road, how can we, it's similar to the fireworks, how can we say you can't in Milton, but the state says you can and you can take this on 400?
I don't know if the state is regulating it as a noise issue. If it, I mean, it may be regulating it as a, I'm not sure which provision you're saying the state allows.
Well, like have the noise controlled equipment removed. So you drive home at 10 o'clock at night
Well,
in a legal vehicle and you're in Milton, you're breaking the law.
if the state allows it just as a general I mean, if they specifically call something out and say this is allowed on the roads, if they call it a specific piece of equipment, then we might have an issue. But typically, it's more of they run to a safety or clean air, exactly, sort of issue. I think we could regulate in terms of just generally noise.
Is this currently in the code? I was just curious.
No, there's no speaking to
And
motor
not in the
vehicles
police,
in our current
department?
code.
Okay.
Gotta get rid of my class packs off
Well,
my
Yeah.
Camaro.
So for the state, for the fireworks, they specifically allow that. Whereas for the noise, they don't specifically allow, like if you remove your muffler, the state doesn't say, okay, Ford F-150s, you can remove the muffler. That would be the difference perhaps? Is that, analogous to that?
I hate to jump in. I'm not sure I followed which was what aspect of the two equations, shall we say.
But on the fireworks, for example, the state is telling you what we can't not allow, right? In a
state,
roundabout way.
the preemption doctrine. I mean,
Not allowed.
it's more of it's called a pervasive regulation of the field, and it just depends on how much regulation is the state involves. If they're telling you what you can and can't do, how much you can do of what, where you can do what, the more of that there is, the less likely it is that we can do something. Okay. If they've just said, we generally don't want you to do X, we can say, well, we generally don't want you to do X, and we don't want you to do Y, Z, and Q. That's where you start to be getting a little more leeway to take action. Okay.
Well, a good one would be number 3, where it's up the boundaries of a public street for racing. The state has some pretty restrictive things as far as racing. So,
They do, I don't know.
State probably doesn't have it off of a public right of way. Maybe it
But
does. I
what
don't know.
Fred's saying is they do have it on public road, like you would, rules and regulations.
Yeah.
One quick other question. So on a lot of the other charts, they have the dBs, so you could tell what a decibel was. When we get to the last page here, you've got unreasonably and disturbing and seriously disturbing. So that's subjective as to the police chief, to Kathy, to the neighbor. Who says it's unreasonable?
That will be a potential enforcement issue as we go on, and it may be some areas that we talked about. There's a number of areas where there's some more subjective, we'll call them subjective terms, that we have to give a citizen a reasonable understanding of what they can and cannot do, and in the gray areas we may not be able to enforce something.
Well, one of the fallbacks specifically was, what would a reasonable person, complain about? So like you said, I mean, if it's, your cat meowing and they're like, this is irritating me to the point where somebody must stop this, a reasonable person wouldn't, have an issue with that.
Yeah.
But we've got a dog, I mean,
Like 50 decibels is easy. Like you tap a little meter, that's 50 decibels.
So you got Fred's neighbor who's working on the Harley. He's working on it until 10 o'clock at night. But he also decides that he's going to absolutely jack that Harley every night at 9:30 on purpose down the road. Fred should have the right to have a reasonable complaint that that's excessive noise.
But are we going to now say that he can't drive his Harley at 9:30 at
You can
night?
drive it at night, you just can't jack it to the point that it's disturbing to the neighbor.
I can see this being an enforcement, just, night. You know what I mean?
Well,
I will
I
say,
think what this does is it gives the police officer the discretion.
Yeah.
I will say noise ordinance, everybody wants it to be subjective because if it bothers me, I want to enforce it.
Right.
But enforcement, it's the only way it's easy is to say, here's the dBs that that was running, and this says you can't do that.
Yeah, to Wilson's point, I just think this is going to be tough to be enforced. enforce this
Well,
paragraph.
however, though, if you, again, just to continue Fred's example, so if Fred complains and the police officer decides to come by and talk to Fred about it, and Fred says, yeah, stop by tomorrow night, you'll hear it at 9:30, Jackson going down the road. And the police officer decides that's unreasonable without a DBA applied to it. Maybe just a quick visit to the neighbor that says, hey, quit jacking it down the street at 9:30 at night, and the problem is solved.
Ours was solved through the homeowners association.
Yeah. But
I mean, I'm fine with.
I'm okay with it.
No, I'm okay with it. I was just pointing.
Yeah,
out
no, I kind of
unreasonable is
agree.
harder to define versus 50 dB
Yeah.
is easier to define.
I will say since we get it typically on the defending the enforcement action perspective, this is one area that it winds up oftentimes being difficult to defend in enforcement, where it's just saying, the judge is going to have someone facing a fine or theoretically jail, saying, I had my radio up and, someone complained about it. Did it violate the noise ordinance? Well, it says reasonable. The judge is kind of looking at it going, am I going to throw someone in jail because they're, if it said it was violated 50, and the city, we come in, or whoever's the deputy comes in and says, here's a printout of the reading of the sound that as I was 10 feet away, per the ordinance, he's made his case, and the magistrate judge may be a lot more inclined to say, black and white, it works. So, I mean, that's just...
We might better serve our enforcement folks if we do put a DBA on it. It's a reasonable number where you're not so restrictive that the person can't have their music turned up when they're rolling down the street and they're enjoying that.
Yeah.
So occasionally...
I throw it out there as, you give yourself too much leeway, you run the risk of not being able to enforce something.
Mm-hmm.
So I think I think what the problem has been in the past is trying to be able to establish, even if there's a DBA, at least with the old ordinance, because it's so convoluted, is to try to establish that.
Yeah, and you also,
it makes it
you have to
difficult.
have
So
your...
it's like, it seems like there's
your meter with
it's
you.
bipolar. I mean, it's like,
Yeah, and
it's
that
either
that's
too
the other
easy
thing
or
is,
too hard. So
does every officer carry a decibel meter, with them as it...
But in the case that we talked about before, enforcement went out and read the meters and found the neighbors were correct in how loud it was. But as you said, enforcement had to go out and measure it and then come back and say, you're...
And that, and hopefully, if many have been written where you've got both, so that you've got a objective standard that should capture, most things without unduly interfering with what people might expect to be able to do in normal life. Then you have a subjective element which you only use when it's obvious. It's really obvious, and you're not, and it would be impossible to capture. Firing a gun repeatedly. Well, is the officer going to be right there for those 30 seconds? I mean, maybe someone will go on for half an hour, sporadically. But just as an example, if you can establish that they definitely fired the gun, and someone can theoretically take another gun and say, there, I've fired it, that's loud. There's no question. This is one of those areas where it's a difficult balance to draw. The best we've seen, or best I've seen, is where they have both of them in there, and if you can't make the objective standard, you can at least try the subjective standard if you got enough people to testify to what they heard and what was going on, what activity actually was, and it's clearly unreasonable, then you're okay. When you start getting into there was a party, down the block, and it was kind of bothering me. That's when you're probably gonna have hard times. Even though you say, look, it bothered me. I was absolutely bothered. That could be, but what's reasonable, what's not is a difficult question.
Let's leave it up to the judge.
Yeah.
So,
Paul, does this answer your other questions about the car stuff, this section, or is it?
Yeah, with that clarification, I'm okay with where it is.
so just to recap, what you wanted us to look at is noise established from schools or government ball fields, all that kind of stuff, to try to look at that, as well as the equestrian community issues with fireworks.
Actually, I was thinking about that when Paul was talking about what's reasonable a minute ago and what you should or shouldn't say to create maybe the intent of our ordinance. What if we didn't address fireworks specifically? What if we said no person shall knowingly create such sounds to put animals at risk, such as spontaneous combustion, whatever, in a way where...
It's probably worth a shot. And hey, we can enforce it until we're told we can't.
Yeah.
And it may be that gives us a shot at a better shot at compliance. It's a good approach to it.
Maybe it's not just fireworks. Fireworks are certainly a significant component of the equestrian community's concerns about alarming sounds to the horses. But it also could be, a shotgun intentionally fired to startle the horses. It could be somebody racing their engine to startle the...
So you're trying to say create a separate ordinance?
Well, no, it would be part of it. I'm
just
just
wanna
looking
include
at
something
this
in-
section 20-657.
No, I was just curious. So you're saying you can't do fireworks? Is
No,
that,
no,
okay.
I'm not saying that at all.
I'm saying-
What I'm saying is, with regard to the equestrian community,
Got it, okay.
no person shall create sound with the intent to
Oh,
cause
just a
harm.
general sound. Okay,
Yeah.
got it.
I don't even know if you could say
Got it,
intent to
got it,
harm, because
got
I
it.
don't think most
Or
people
knowing.
do
Got
it.
it. No,
Shall
I
knowingly-
understand where you're going.
Yeah. So,
But I think it's kind of similar to the section 20-657, the general loud disturbing noises. It shall be unlawful for any person to create or assist in creating any unreasonably loud and disturbing noise in the city. It's kind of like the same, but for animals or something similar.
Yep.
So,
somewhere where we...
Yeah, I understand.
Yeah. And we've had some instances in the city where people are knowingly agitating horses. It's for sport. And the equestrian community would love some
Yeah, I understand. Yeah.
some path to have some pushback against that. Because now we can't enforce it. Because if it's we don't have...
That aspect of it, I wouldn't have any problem with at all. The knowing with the intent to cause harm, that I could almost go into the criminal.
harm or agitation. Or
or
irritation or
yeah.
whatever. Because not just just harm, but to knowingly agitate the animals. That would be, we could wordsmith something along those lines that gives the equestrian community some opportunity for recourse. That would be great.
Or just protect them, maybe not for recourse, but to protect them.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, we can work on some
fine with
language.
right, yeah.
Great.
Okay.
Probably the only other thing too is I think we want to add back in, or at least I'd like to see added back in, Kathy's ability
Yeah,
to.
or,
Oh,
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, and I'll just use the same verbiage that we did in the old one, so we'll do that for the variance. We'll just add that in, okay?
And did you capture the chart change about the residential use of the maintenance, lawn maintenance equipment?
The penalties are, refer back to our list of,
Right, yeah, it's usually up, it's chapter 2, and it's just the typical thing when they go to court, and it's the judge and the solicitor decide on it and all that, so.
We don't need a motion or anything, do we? Since it's
Yeah,
not.
we do.
We do? Oh, we don't have a full
Yeah.
motion? Okay.
I mean, I guess we don't have to, but.
Yeah, okay, shoot, yeah. All right, open up for a motion.
Can I just say one more thing?
Yep.
Just to go back to this 2662 about the animals, I think that's very, I mean, you talk about open, what's a complaint for a barking dog versus, I think in the old days before Milton was a city, I think the police would come out and they would time it maybe for 15 or 20 minutes. And if the dog, did something for a period of time, but I don't know why would this even be in there? I don't know how you could possibly enforce it. And I mean, that's a he said, she said with the barking. And I mean, I think the old days, they would come out and time it and say, okay, that's got to be 15, 20 minutes. And they wait there and get that dog kept barking the whole
I
time.
know that's what Cobb County did, because I got notices.
So I just don't see how
Long time
you
ago.
enforce this.
So what do you?
Well, I think, I mean, like I said, the old days, I think they would come out and they would time an animal for 15 minutes, constantly yelping or barking, and then they could issue a citation.
Maybe, is this new? And this is not in the old one? This is,
Right,
so this wasn't even addressed, the nuisance of animals,
Correct,
right?
yes.
Maybe, and was this paragraph taken from another code anywhere? Or
This
or
was
is
taken from the
Oh, it was? The Charlotte one?
Charlotte.
It was?
Mecklenburg,
Okay.
yeah. I mean, I guess we could add, if you wanted to add some sort of.
Because didn't you say that's your number one complaint, probably, on noise?
Was dog, I mean.
Is it? I mean, just,
Not number one, but I mean, fairly frequently, we get complaints
maybe,
about.
maybe to Mark's point, maybe y'all can look at some other local ordinances and see how they address that, because it is pretty,
Vague. And
yeah. But, I mean, depends on what mood the officer is in that day, I guess. I don't know.
Well, I think if you gave it a time limit.
Yeah.
A certain. whether
It's usually like 15. I know exactly what
You know
you're
what I'm
talking
talking
about. I mean, were y'all interested in them just looking at other municipalities on that?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Just take a look.
Okay,
Y'all good with that?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
so, but, to look at other municipal.
Because I think your whole
what do you
thing
want?
is you wanted to enforce this.
You gotta
to have
quantify it.
The whole point of this is to have more enforcement anyway, so.
So let's say if a bunch of jurisdictions had something about a number of minutes to take their number of minutes maximum.
Yeah,
Of
the
disturbance.
idea is to make it less vague. isn't
Correct.
it?
And
To
so-
enforce it,
So
right.
to Mark's point, that's probably
Right.
a good idea.
I think that's a good point, yeah.
Okay.
So let's try to quantify.
Yeah,
that.
and we'll look and see what there's out there, and then we'll propose it to the council, and I'm sure.
So by voting, you're taking it forward to the council with these proposed changes. We won't see it again with the.
Right,
things we've
unless
asked
you
to
want to
look at.
wait and defer it, or it's up to you
I don't think
guys
there's any
what
way
you want.
could maybe, as soon as you got
Why
it.
don't we send it along
And-
to you
yeah,
with a
just send it
draft,
along.
and if you feel that it should be 20 minutes as opposed to 15 minutes for the dog barking, we'll accept that as an amendment, and we'll modify it before it hits the council, but.
So let me
you'll
just-
still have a chance to look at it and give us some feedback. How does that sound?
So it's a timing issue, so, and I'm on vacation next week, so
Well, you
whatever.
could-
it's as
not
fast
now,
as we-
not now.
I'm just saying that from a
All in
practical
favor of
standpoint.
sending vacation?
So, I mean, the first read is next Thursday, so.
Oh, it's next Thursday.
Yeah.
But we can modify it after the first read.
That's true, okay.
So,
That's true.
let's just play this out, and we'll give you a chance.
I don't want to defer it just based on that
coming into it.
one little thing, so.
Right.
Just let us know what you have, and we'll just do a reply all or whatever, just so it's on.
Right, so I'll forward you what we come out of. So there could be a first read that could be, after the first read, there could be another modification
Okay.
depending
Yeah,
on
because there's going to be a workshop, so,
Right.
it could be, it
Okay.
could change as well. I mean, there's lots of
Oh,
time.
there'll be a work
here.
session? Okay,
Yes,
okay,
yes,
Yeah.
okay.
right.
That's good. Yeah, I'm good. All right, I know Paul wants his money question. You got a money question?
No, we need to make a motion on
Oh,
that.
that's right. All right, motion?
So I move we approve the text amendment to Chapter 20, Environment, Article 7, Noise Control, with the proposed changes to staff to be once measured, to be circulated to the Planning Commission for review prior to first read.
Or,
It really,
Prior to work session?
Part of,
Yeah.
part of the
Can-
work session.
Can I, just for technical purposes, to be clear, if individually you can review, and if you're not having an official meeting,
Right.
you can't generally get to, even by email, say, do we all agree on this? Do we all agree on that? That would actually not be
Okay, so
appropriate
then
step, but you can individually make comments
I'll
to
amend the motion
staff.
to say, approve the text amendment to Chapter 20 Environment, Article 7 Noise Control, with recommendations made by Planning Commission. And just stop it at that, and staff has the discretion to put
Certainly.
content in as we've asked.
Okay.
All right, have a second?
Second.
All right, any discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Oppose?
Great, thank you. Do we have any more? Okay, let me just, I do have a few announcements. This summer's getting busy again. Every year I wonder how it gets so busy, but it does. We will be moving this draft noise ordinance through, so it will hit the city council in July at their July 17th work session. In addition, at that work session, we've asked the consultants who are doing the Unified Development Code to present what we're referring to as a diagnostic, in that they're going through all the codes that are going to be included in the UDC and identifying issues that need to be addressed. So the idea is to present them to the council to get direction from the council if it's areas that the council would like them to address. So it's nothing that will come to you first, because it's really not any changes to the text. It's just really the diagnostic to get direction from the council. So that's going to be happening in July. Also in July, on July 12th, we're having our next stakeholder meeting, and I think you've all been invited to it, for the tree ordinance. And the idea is to have that meeting, and then depending on the modifications that will be suggested at that meeting, our hope is to bring that finalized draft to the Planning Commission at the end of July, to your July meeting. All right? And then on to the City Council after you vote on it. I think those are the major events that are happening at this point, so I just wanted to bring you up to speed.
I have a question. The paper picked up the fact that the form-based code for Crabapple didn't have the buffers contemplated for the building that was being contemplated.
Right.
What's going to happen with that?
Well, the council has put a moratorium in place for those parcels that are on the edge of the form-based code that border into Alpharetta with single-family residential homes. And we have identified 3 parcels. So the moratorium applies to those 3 parcels.
That's not inclusive of the one that's in question, though,
That
right
is
now,
correct,
right?
because
that's
that one is
grandfathered.
already in the queue. It's already been accepted, so it does not include that one.
Okay. And then I have one more question. I know that we resolved the $50 thing last time. We talked about as a planning commission, we had talked about donating our $50 to, a particular charity or whatever. And you said, I guess the read was we couldn't do that as a group. And then we were supposed to take some individual action or not take individual action based on that.
I think what I remembered, what you wanted to know is whether you could be issued a physicals check, so that would be an easier way for you to be able to
Yep.
donate. And I did find out that you can be issued physical checks. So,
Okay. So is that how we're proceeding?
if that's what you guys want to do, when you fill out the paperwork, you can just indicate you want paper checks.
So now we have to do those long form.
Yeah, no matter what, you have to do the long
You're going to get taxed on that
forms.
$50. They're going to send you a 1099, right?
Well, it'll be below 600, so,
Well, $50 a meeting.
but we only have 11 at the most this year.
Yeah,
So it'll be
you're under
550,
the
so
600.
could we just get a check in December for
Whatever.
all of it at once and just be done with it that way?
I'm fine with whatever y'all want to do. Just be honest.
I don't care, I just want discretion over where it goes.
Yeah.
Right, and I think by keeping the paper checks, then you could donate it to whomever
Correct,
you
okay.
wanted to. I mean, it was the easier way for your
Correct.
keeping
No,
account.
that makes sense, Paul.
Well,
No.
I can run you a copy.
Instead of Robin getting her bonus, you're going to take it. You're going to take it. I understand. I said,
Yeah, I'm gonna pocket that $38.50 after taxes.
Robin is not going to be able to go to the Sizzler tomorrow night.
Waving,
What? I did it because I didn't want to fill out all that paperwork.
I did too.
Yeah.
I did the same. Almost stand.
You know, they like browbeat us into it. Here you go.
Yeah, I'm not.
Peer
wanna-
pressure.
Don't wanna direct it.
I
We
hear you.
could
No, that's
be
good.
asking for a lot more because I noticed yesterday or the day before the news that one of the councils were asking a raise from 36,000. I think it was
Forsyth,
It's probably in Illinois.
the Forsyth.
Forsyth.
Yeah.
No, I didn't think, was it Forsyth?
Yeah,
It
it was on the news last night
36,000.
I don't know what the numbers are.
What?
It was 36,000 to 66,000.
For a
their
councilman?
county commissioner, I think. Part-time, but they're still part-time. That's a good part-time job.
That's ridiculous. That's
And that's what they were saying,
Yeah.
that with all the expansion and everything, that they were spending somewhere between 20 and 25 hours.
They
per
probably don't need to run
week.
for reelection then. I don't know.
Yeah,
That's just, yeah.
interesting use
Do
of
y'all have
tax
anything
credit.
else or any other questions?
Crazy. I'm good. Good. Y'all good? All right. Motion for adjournment?
So moved.
Second?
All in favor, say aye. Aye. Oppose? Thank you.